All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the webinar brought to you from healthharm.net. And we're talking today about the Falcon Ethane Pipeline. Our guest, Sam Rubright, will be joining me in just a sec. And it looks like we've got Kirk Jalbert here as well. So just as I get things set up, can you hear me? Can you just tell me in the chat if you can hear me, if my microphone's working loud and clear? I'm good. Thanks, Kirk. Awesome. So where are you tuning in from, everyone? It's always really fun to see. So Gina's from Ohio, Melissa in Potter County, Pennsylvania. Awesome. Ranjana, how's it going? Hold on. There's an echo. Thank you. Let me see what I can do about that. And Katie in Seattle, Lori in Berkeley, Nicole in Cleveland. This is awesome. And there's 26 people on. It looks like 15 people registered last minute, which is always really fun. It's fun to see the numbers go up. I'm going to invite Sam on the screen here. Sam Rubright from FracTracker, who's joining us for the webinar today. And let's see. Sam, looking for you. So this is, I think this is the second, this is the second webinar that we've done this year. Maybe it's the third. We've done a bunch of these short 30-minute training webinars, and the goal here is Health the Harm Network has a lot of people in the network that are really skilled, talented folks that are working on amazing projects, all geared towards supporting your work, confronting the oil and gas industry, right? Halting the harms, protecting yourself. We all approach this from different angles, but the tools and the resources that are available, folks like Sam and FracTracker are offering. I think the last webinar was about the Frac Health database. You can find the replay to that as well on our website. And then we have a bunch of other things that are coming up. For example, the Environmental Health Registry is coming up. It's going to be a presentation with Sarah from Environmental Health Project. And we've got some other stuff coming up too. Working with folks from Earthworks Act, working with different campaigns. So also just got to give a quick shout out to Ranjana. Hey, Ranjana in Arlington, Texas, is working really hard to protect her community from a gas company that wants to start drilling within 300 feet of schools and homes. And so, yeah, Ranjana, we're definitely supporting your work as well. I'm thinking about you right now. Okay, cool. Sam is here, and we're just working out the screen invite. And let me see. Looks like we also have Kirk here. So just a sec. All right. So I'm pulling up my monitor, and I'm going to open up the slideshow, and we're going to get started in just a minute. So just a couple logistics. If you see right below the video, you'll see that there's an area where you can ask questions. And what's really cool about the questions is that when you put a question there for Sam or Kirk, when they answer the question, that answer will be timestamped in the time of the video when they answer it. So that makes it easier for people who come and watch the replay to be able to get the answers to those questions. And then also, and because we have people from outside of the very specific range that the Falcon Ethane Pipeline impacts, we're definitely going to be able to talk a little bit about, I think, the implications of this type of mapping and taking this type of data and bringing it public and using it to help form our response. In many ways, that's the theme of the webinar. So thanks for being patient while we get a couple of these details figured out. Let me see if I can get Kirk on here too for the Q&A portion as well. There's Sam. Hey, what's up?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to do two things with my phone, and it kept trying to screencast.
I can't hear you yet, or actually, I guess the viewers. Can you hear Sam?
I guess I should try that again. Okay, yeah, they said.
Hold on just a sec, Sam. I think I need to put in my headphones. Oh, good. Everybody can hear Sam. One moment. Cool.
Hey, Faith.
How's it going, Sam? Well,
Hey, good.
don't
How
tell
are
me
you?
yet.
Hello.
Great. Hey, Kirk. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Turn it a little bit. You can see our logo.
So, would you both start by introducing yourself? I'm going to get the presentation loaded up.
Yeah, sure thing. Kirk, go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Kirk Jalbert, and I'm the manager of community-based research and engagement at FracTracker. I am here because I spearheaded the Falcon Public EIA project, which we'll be talking about today. Sam's going to be running the presentation, and I'm going to answer any technical questions and be available as a resource here.
And I'm Samantha Rubright, and I'm the manager of communications and partnerships at FracTracker. We're all kind of spread out across the country, which is why we're not casting from the same office. I'm in DC and Kirk's in Pittsburgh. Does that give you enough time, Ryan?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Thanks so much. So I'm going to share my screen now and pull up the presentation. So how's that look?
I still just see me, so I don't know if I need to switch screens.
Yeah, just a sec. Let me fix that. I'm glad that we can still hear each other as we get this going. So, awesome. There we go. Focus the screen and present. Perfect. Here we go. Pipeline near you. So, yeah, welcome everyone to the presentation portion of the webinar. My name is Ryan. I'm part of Halt the Harm. We kind of went over this at the very beginning, so I'm not going to get too into it here, but essentially my goal is to help folks that are getting involved in the network connect with each other more. So, and then I host these webinar series, which is really fun. So I'm really grateful that I get to be here and I get to help introduce all of you who are attending to the amazing guests that we have on today. So one of the things that you're going to get from today's presentation is insights about FracTracker's recently released Falcon Public EIA project, the Environmental Impact Assessment, and learning how to access interactive maps that show the risks involved in this pipeline route, and discovering the importance of data transparency with pipeline permitting, which is, I think, what's going to really be pertinent to folks that aren't in the direct region of the Falcon Pipeline. Finding out ways that you can get involved as well. So just some logistics. There'll be a recording, so we'll be able to send you the replay when we're done. You can contact me anytime at ryan@halttheharm.net if you have any sort of technical issues accessing it. The chat is for engagement in real time. It's really fun. But then you can also ask questions that we'll save up for the end of the presentation. So ask questions as soon as they come up. Just click on that button and add it in. So you've met Sam, you've met Kirk. Welcome. Really honored to have both of you here. Let's jump right into it.
Okay, so for those of you who may not be familiar with FracTracker, we're a nonprofit whose mission is to study, map, and communicate the risks of oil and gas development, as well as its entanglements with the petrochemical industry. There's a lot of things going on here that we're trying to bring out data to look at. We do this in order to provide communities, stakeholders, researchers with tools to make informed decisions about what's going on within the industry, and also just what's going on around them. The proposed Falcon Pipeline will carry more than 107,000 barrels of ethane per day, set to feed Shell's ethane cracker plant being built in southwestern Pennsylvania. Shell will then convert the ethane into ethylene for making plastics. The Falcon will cross through some 25 municipalities in 3 different states. And we believe at FracTracker that people living in those communities deserve an opportunity to participate in shaping the pipeline's development, the project. However, pipeline projects are incredibly complex. Public comment periods are often very short. Shell submitted permit applications for the Falcon Pipeline in September 2007, and the original 30-day public comment period began on January 20th. Permit applications can run many thousands of pages and require extensive time to understand their content. Meanwhile, the scope of how risks and impacts are addressed within the permit applications can be very limited, especially when certain pipelines are not required to undergo a full environmental impact assessment or an EIA. hence where we got the name. And that is the case with the Falcon. One of the unfortunate aspects of how pipelines come into being is that in many instances, communities don't realize they may be affected by a project until after pipeline operators have already acquired the easements that they need for the right-of-way, as well as construction plans already being underway. While concerned citizens can stitch together paper maps that are provided by the companies in their permit applications, that process can be complex and very labor-intensive. And also, especially speaking to the audience today, on a broader level, pipelines have implications for locking regions into long-term dependencies on the oil and gas industry. So it's very important for those that are working and advocating in this field on oil and gas are kept up to speed, but it's really difficult without access to the data related to it. All right, so we can move on to the next slide. So in December 2016, FracTracker discovered a vast archive of publicly visible GIS or mappable data pertaining to the Falcon. We immediately recognized it as a unique opportunity to address some of those problems that I just mentioned. Once we understood, just kind of taking a look at the data, going through it, once we understood the significance of it, we also realized we needed to ask a couple of questions that were pertinent to the area. We held 4 workshops over 12 months and identified 5 kind of major questions that we wanted to investigate within this data. Trying to establish the pipeline route and what properties Shell needed to acquire, where the water crossings were. Pennsylvania is a very, very water-rich state, so we knew that there were going to be some issues with that. We also wanted to look at the Falcon's proximity to buildings and recreational spaces, looking also at the potential blast zone and what populated areas might be at risk, as well as sensitive habitats and species of concern that could be impacted. And from all of these questions, the Falcon Public EIA project was born. And we just released it a few weeks ago when the public comment period began in Pennsylvania. The original public comment deadline was February 20th, hence why we were planning to host the webinar today. Concerned citizen groups have taken a lot of the media coverage that originated from the release of this project to push the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, to extend the public comment period and hold public hearings in areas that will be impacted by the pipeline. And actually just got word today that the DEP has agreed to do this. They are extending the public comment period to April 17th. And they are also going to be holding 3 public hearings in Allegheny, Beaver, and Washington counties in Pennsylvania. Okay, we can go on the next slide. Preliminary analysis of this was a massive collection of data, but we also accessed a couple other sources of data as well. And in going through all of this information, we found that there would be 97.5 miles of pipeline proposed to be built through 22 townships in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We found that the Falcon will intersect 319 streams and 174 wetlands. And those are just the direct ones that will be directly impacted. There are hundreds more that are near the construction areas. We also identified 550 family residences, 20 businesses, 240 groundwater wells, 12 public parks, 5 schools, 6 daycare centers, and 16 emergency response centers are all within the risk areas. And Kirk, correct me if I'm wrong, this is 660 feet is what we would determine as the risk area, right?
Actually, there's a couple of different ways in which we assess risk on this project. And for those who might be familiar with pipelines, there are high consequence areas, and then there are also things called class locations. And class locations is a 660-foot buffer that the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration uses to look for built structures. And then the high consequence area is a designation that's used to look to see if the sensitive ecosystems and drinking water areas, and that sort of varies depending on what's being carried in the pipeline. And being an ethane pipeline, this one had a fairly large buffer area. So with these risk areas, the numbers that are here are kind of a conglomerate of things that were identified in either one of those risk areas, depending on whether or not it was a structure, an ecological area, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, thank you. One of the reasons that we bring up this group of statistics in particular is because pipelines can pose significant public health risks. For instance, a 2016 pipeline incident caused by corroded welding leveled a house 200 feet away. Another house 800 feet away sustained major damage, and its occupant received third-degree burns while sitting in his living room. And unfortunately, this incident, it was not unique. According to federal data, there have been 4,215 pipeline incidents nationwide since 2010. These have resulted in 100 fatalities, 470 injuries, and property damage exceeding $3.4 billion. So needless to say, access to this data early on is really important, and not only for the people within the path of the pipeline, but it also helped to inform a whole assortment of reporter investigations as well. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So one of the important stories that came out of this, we found in our watershed analysis that the Falcon would disturb headwater streams of the Ambridge Reservoir, as well as the raw water line leading out of the reservoir to the treatment plant. This reservoir supplies 6.5 million gallons of water a day to 30,000 customers in 9 townships. When this information was brought to the attention of the Ambridge Water Authority, they released a statement to the public and the DEP stating that they would do everything in their power to have the pipeline routed outside the watershed. They were not aware of the implications of this original project. Next slide. While researching communities that would be within the range of Falcon's blast zone, we discovered the pipeline will run straight through a new luxury housing development in Allegheny County, PA. We passed this information along to investigative reporters at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. They learned that the developer signed agreements with Shell, sectioned off parcels for new houses, and nobody told the new homeowners about the pending pipeline. These homeowners are now organizing to determine what actions they might be able to take against the housing developer and Shell. These are only a few of the stories FracTracker highlighted from the data, but there are no doubt many other aspects of the project that residents would consider important and relevant for their own reasons. This situation underscores the importance of making pipeline permitting information accessible and understandable in a timely manner. Okay, next slide. And so now for some kind of takeaways. The stories I just outlined for you demonstrate that data-driven projects like this one can help to foster deeper public engagements with the regulatory process and expand public dialogue. Even though we came across this data accidentally, it's important to continue to push for improved data transparency when and wherever possible. All of this information that I discussed today and more, there's a lot more, is available on our website in the form of articles and clickable dynamic maps under the project name Falcon Public EIA. These maps and articles that we developed are crucial tools, but I would be remiss in not acknowledging the many groups of people with whom we collaborated to make this data transparency opportunity possible. Especially, I would say the Clean Air Council and the Breathe Project were very, very helpful throughout the process. And I also need to acknowledge the incredible efforts of Kirk here. He led this initiative and was really able to pursue so many different issues that were related to the project. And I think we just have to acknowledge this was a big lift for him and for FracTracker. So thank you. And another action item that I think would be helpful is we've added the Falcon's route to our pipeline, to our, excuse me, to FracTracker's mobile app. If you're not familiar, it's a tool we developed. It's free for mobile phones for people to see oil and gas activity near them on a map. They can report incidents and submit geolocated photographs. So, you know, even if it's not this pipeline that you're concerned about, there are obviously a lot of pipelines across the US. The mobile app can be used to document those concerns, construction issues, and the like. We just hope that this kind of tool and the the project that we worked on have been helpful to concerned residents and citizen watchdogs. And so now I would love to start fielding questions with Kirk. If they're, Ryan, unless you have any specific questions you want to ask first.
No, thank you so much. It's awesome. I'm just going to switch my screen over real quick. Uh-oh.
We have the multiple dimensions going on.
There we go. I think all three of us are showing now. Cool. Thank you so much. And so I'll just remind people that the questions area is right at the bottom underneath the window. And Sam, I believe you might be able to see that as well.
I can.
If you click on it. Cool. So when you start answering a question, if you click Start Answering, it'll bookmark the answer into the video, which is pretty cool.
Okay.
So
it's not letting me choose any. It's just showing me what questions people have asked.
Okay, cool. So I'll read off the question and then I'll click Start, and then either of you can jump in. How's that? Cool. So Ron is asking, are you aware of the proposed fracking fluid treatment plan near Coudersport, PA?
That's a good question.
I mean, yes, this is, in fact, Melissa Trotman's on the line here. She would definitely be the person to comment on this since they've been following it closely. In fact, I'll just leave it up to her. I haven't been doing some deep coverage, but I'm very well aware of it. And of course, I think that it's hit the Pittsburgh media market. I think it should be hitting it harder. But, recall just a number, 7 or 8 years ago, Pittsburgh was facing some pretty significant issues with its water and sewer authority, increasing, bromide levels coming in through the water intakes and trihalometane levels that were being, implicated in that interactions with the chlorination process. And I think the fact that there's another waste facility, treatment facility that's being proposed in the headwaters of the Allegheny should raise concerns, because we're right back where we started 10 years ago.
Great. So Melissa asks, how often is the app updated and using whose data?
It's using a combination of data. Kirk, you've been kind of working closely with the mobile app. I don't know if you want to speak to that directly.
Sure. Yeah. So the mobile app has a couple of different data sets in it. Primarily, the mobile app allows you to see oil and gas wells that are based on our national data set, and that's conventional as well as unconventional wells. And the reason why we say all wells is because, as we all know, unconventional wells are categorized differently depending on what state you're in, and so making those discrepancies is a little difficult. But we update our national data set on a regular basis, and all of that comes from state data sources, and so that layer is the wells. We also, and I see the question about Colorado. All of the wells for Colorado are already in the mobile app, and in fact, we've done some deployments in Colorado with our Longmont and a lot of organizations that are based on the Front Range, Greeley, Colorado, and they've already been submitting reports. And then the other data layer that is in there are compressor stations and processing facilities. That data set is honestly really sketchy, and it's a conglomeration of different sources. Some of it comes from the federal government. Other comes from data sets that we've worked to clarify and vet with groups like SkyTruth, and we've done our best to make that accurate with caveats. And then, of course, the pipeline layer and the mobile app, which is what we're talking about today. Pipeline data is also really sketchy. And so we've actually created two separate distinctions on the pipelines and the mobile app. One are data layers that we can't vouch for because in some cases, the federal data, pipeline just runs straight for 20 miles. And we know that that's not the case, that, these things, wind and curve. And then we have a separate layer that is vetted pipelines, which are projects that we've been involved in, that we've either done the digitization ourselves or feel very confident that those are the precise routes of the pipeline. And that's how the Falcon is represented. We also have the Mariner East pipeline. The Constitution, I believe, is in there, Atlantic Coast. So we've been doing this for a number of pipelines, and those are also the proposed pipeline routes, which you wouldn't find those on the federal data sets.
We've also been working with some groups who are concerned about export terminals, and that's additional data sets that we're hoping to add in the future.
Great. So Barbara asks, are there any compressor stations along the Falcon route? Compressor stations pose their own particular risks. And I see, Kirk, that you've added a comment and wanted to bring that up as well.
Well, the Falcon Pipeline is an ethane pipeline. And as such, its origin points are 3 cryogenic separator facilities where natural gas, wet gas from the Marcellus and Utica region come and get split into different products. Ethane and butane and propane and natural gas, they all kind of go to different areas. And so, yes, there are compressor stations all over the place in these areas because you're talking about, densely drilled and developed oil and gas regions of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. But there's no easy way to correspond and say, well, this compressor station is going to the Falcon Pipeline because it's just this vast network of gathering lines and compressor stations that are sending their product to various locations, and a subset of that would go to one of these 3 cryogenic separator facilities. But there's other cryogenic separator facilities that are managed by different companies that those compressor stations could also be going to. But yeah, there's many dozens of them. We identified one compressor station that is actually the edge of the compressor station facility is within the blast radius of the Falcon Pipeline. And so I highlighted that in the article on cumulative impacts and development as one area that should be paid attention to for potential risk.
Great, thank you. The next question says, apart from the risk of explosions, what health risks are associated with ethane leaks?
That's a good question. Of course, explosions are the ones that get public attention more than anything. But there's also, when you do high consequence analysis for hazardous liquid pipelines, which is separate from a natural gas pipeline, and ethane is classified as a hazardous natural gas liquid. There's sort of 2 different ways that you look at high consequence areas. One is a blast zone in which if there was an explosion, then you would be partially disintegrated or entirely disintegrated. The numbers around that are interesting. You have to have a 99.9% chance of surviving an explosion, and that's how they kind of define this line of where you are and are not in the blast zone. But then you also have a more extended analysis that you have to look at vapor dispersion, because ethane it's lighter than air. I'm sorry, it's denser than air rather, but it's also sort of light enough vapor gas that it can travel through valleys and downstream beds, and so you can also have just exposure to these gases in lower levels, no different than if you were walking down the street and you smell a gas leak on your street. Your house hasn't blown up, but you probably have a gas leak somewhere in your neighborhood, and that can cause other kinds of issues. And that's just what
you can't smell ethane.
You can't smell it, right? Because there's no identifying gas that's included in here because it's a midstream product. But the thing I want to raise is that with pipelines, we're not just talking about public health risk. I mean, a significant reason why people are concerned about this is also environmental risk, because you're looking at significant land clearing, permanent habitat disruption, deforestation, cutting through hundreds, in some cases thousands of streams on other pipelines, and that produces sediment and erosion within those streams that can kill off wildlife. And also when you have to do horizontal boring underneath roadways in larger rivers and watersheds. The other pipeline in Pennsylvania, the Mariner East, which extends across the state, was shut down for a period of time by the state because they had 109 spills of drilling mud fluids into people's streams or groundwater wells because it was coming up through limestone formations and all these crazy things. So there's a lot that can be caused by pipelines besides an explosion that we need to pay attention to.
The next question from Nancy says, what are the chances of being able to change the laws so that the permitting process requires much more advanced notification and environmental analysis before permits are approved?
I think that's a great question, and it's also going to depend significantly on the state in which you reside. I think it's a lot about public pressure, and Kirk, I don't know if you have ideas specifically on those processes, but it is possible. It's just going to take a lot of work.
Yeah, I did an interview with the person who's in charge of GIS at the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, and I said, hey, look, the public is smarter than you realize. If we have access to GIS data, or really all sorts of data. We're capable of using it. And I say we, I don't mean just technical service providers like FracTracker, but, average citizens that have mapping experience that are not out of reach of most people now that the technologies have gotten cheaper and easier to use. People don't want to just air their grievances and say they're pissed off about something. They want to actually be able to make intelligent comments. And in order to do that, you need to give them the resources to do it. And so what do we have to do to be able to make it so the DEP, by default requires companies to submit GIS data, and by default submits all that GIS data or posts it on their website when permits get posted. And oh, by the way, can we also make it default that the permits get posted on the website and I don't have to wait 3 weeks to do a file review down at your office on, a bunch of printed documents? And the response that I got was, well, there's no reason we can't do it. We just have to change the rules. It's not like we have to go to our legislature and say, can we please ask for GIS data? The primary concern in the agency is who becomes the stewards of that information. Being under capacity and under resourced, who's responsible for maintaining all that data and who's responsible for posting it and who's responsible for vetting it. And so I was really surprised to find out that there wasn't necessarily a vehement opposition to this within the agency, just more like we just don't know how to do it. We could, which means that, I think about the history of well data in Pennsylvania, for instance, and when FracTracker first got started in 2010, the stuff was just not even in the public view. And it was a result of, groups like us and Clean Air Council and, Clean Water Action, you name it, all these different organizations that just kept hammering on the DEP to be more transparent about this stuff. And then all of a sudden they created a website, and then there was data, and then there was more data. And so I think that what I've been trying to use this project as personally in my own little sort of, campaign is to use this as a model to say, DEP, why can't you do this for pipelines too? You did it for wells. And that in and of itself, I think, creates new policy, a higher standard of how they have to be responsible to public inquiry.
I think some of this too is sort of entrenched in the history of a lot of these regulatory agencies. We did a review of data. This was specifically well data a couple of years ago. And we looked at 10 different states across the US, and it was amazing to see the variance in technological capacity of even just their websites, let alone how data was shared. So I think in some senses, it's just these large agencies trying to play catch up with the technology that's available now. It's a lot easier to share shape files and these GIS files. It's a lot easier to store them. It's a lot cheaper to store them than it used to be. So in some senses, I think we're finally getting caught up on the technology side that it is possible.
Great. The next question comes from Ellen.
Hey, Ellen.
Yes, please. Export terminals.
We haven't forgotten.
Like Cove Point. My connection is in and out, sadly. Hear a sentence or two, then garbled back and forth. Oh, sorry about that, Ellen. Hope you can get to the replay and catch up. But says, I'm glad you remembered terminals. Maryland banned fracking. Whoopee. But Cove Point goes forward.
Are you required to remark on the whoopee part? No, we definitely have not forgotten, Ellen. That is on our very long to-do list, but it is on there, and we promise that export terminals are a really important air quality, public safety concern for people, and we want to make sure that information like that gets shared as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's it for the questions that are in the queue. I have a quick question myself, which is you talked about after you mapped it and then you discovered like, hey, this goes right through housing development, and they didn't tell any of the people who live there. And so for me, that really stood out as like, I'm just so glad that you chose that example, because that just seems like such an amazing organizing tool to like mobilize people who otherwise might not be thinking about these issues or that concerned about it, but somebody who just bought a home and then finds out later that they were essentially lied to or tricked into, buying something that's right on top of a dangerous pipeline route. I guess what was your like after you got that data? I'm thinking about how this might apply for people in other regions too, who might want to do their own research, and they'd use data that was available. And then, so what did you do that you brought it to journalists? What was your process for doing that?
Sure. So it's interesting. The amount of data that we had access to is kind of mind blowing. In fact, there's just today I was relating to somebody that there was stuff that I didn't even get a chance to write about that I want to sort of follow back around on. But some of the data was so explicitly obvious that there are issues that we needed to hone in on, and this was one of them. And so, Shell actually had hand scanned or had received a copy of all the layouts of the housing development from the developer. And had scanned it and put it right in their GIS maps so that they could sort of see how it related to their pipeline. I was like, well, clearly this is an area of concern. And then later when we got access to doing the file review on the permit applications, it said right in there, this housing development has plans for a very large luxury housing development. We did our best to try and route it, in a safe manner in partnership with the development. And so this is the route that we chose. And so clearly they were going back and forth with the developer, but nobody that was living in those areas were clearly, they weren't aware of this. And part of it is that what this developer did is they bought 2 large farms, which is what happens in the suburbs. You buy a giant plot of land, and then you decide you're going to subdivide it to 100 homes. And the easements that were signed, the easements on the property were signed on those original 2 large parcels. And then the pipeline isn't actually going to go through people's backyards. It's going to go down the streets of the development. And so, there's this weird gray area of the street probably gets handed over to the county or to the municipality for management afterwards, or the housing or whoever is the home, maybe the homeowner, group or whatever it may be. So the homeowner itself, it's not their property. So do they have to, notify on easements? Pennsylvania doesn't have any laws about having to notify on easements that I'm aware of. But the other issue is that there's no laws that say, and Colorado experienced this recently with the explosion of the home near gathering lines. There's nothing that says you can't build too close to a pipeline. There's no setbacks in reverse when we talk about development. And so those are all really interesting things to us. And so I brought it to a reporter at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that I had brought in as a very, very early confidant on this project, because she had already been writing about the ethane cracker that this thing was going to connect to. And I said, Anya, I want to give you an insight on this, and we can help start developing stories very early on. And so she had gone off and done some very early research with some of those homeowners, and that's when we discovered that none of them had been notified. And the interesting thing about this is that after she wrote a big piece that was called "What Pipeline" in the Post-Gazette, it turns out another development right next to this particular development also had concerned residents that started to come forward because they weren't notified either. And so I think that one of the interesting, when I was doing some time out in Colorado, I was really fascinated to see that this was a very common thing where a developer acquires a piece of land, builds 50 homes on it, but reserves an area to the side because they also retain their mineral rights and they're going to put a well pad in once the houses are done being built. I didn't think that I would see that out here in Pennsylvania, but it seems like that's what's happening. And in fact, once we did a little bit more research in our Allegheny lease mapping project that we had executed about 1.5 years ago, we found out that that same developer had also leased out the mineral rights from underneath those properties. And so not only were these people getting a pipeline, they're automatically buying into a house that has split estate issues.
Ranjana is just confirming that they also don't have reverse setback rules in Arlington, Texas either.
So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And Melissa made a comment that the DEP could have graduate students do some of the data transparency work. And after an agency official vets it for public disclosure, saving staff time, dollars. Does FracTracker plan to follow up on Kirk's work to help DEP change its rules for increased public access?
We'll definitely be continuing this project. Kirk is actually moving on after FracTracker. We're very excited for him and his family, but we will be continuing this work and continuing the relationship that we have with DEP and their data.
And we actually just got additional resources from a funder that was they were very encouraged by the work that we had done this past year on the Falcon and offered us more resources to keep on moving. So I'm here for another 2 months, and then after that I pass the baton on to somebody else.
Awesome. And how pure is the ethane in the pipeline? It's our last question from Celia.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
I would assume
Okay.
since it's being sent to the cracker facility that it's been processed, but it may again be processed before it's used at the cracker.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sam and Kirk, for coming on, and Sam for putting together a presentation. And thanks everybody who attended. 33 people showed up live. This was really awesome. We're going to keep doing these training webinars. Melissa jumped in here and said, we should do a separate webinar on the Countersport facility. So definitely let's talk, Melissa. Anybody else that's watching, that's listening, that has something that they want to share with the network, check out halttheharm.net and get in touch with us. You can also join our directory. There's a few hundred people in the directory all over the country, and some folks up in Canada as well, and the UK. We had 2 people join the Halt the Harm network over in the UK who are working around fracking and oil and gas issues. So it's just really cool. It's a directory where you get to put in your profile your interests and your skills. And so you can connect with people who have skills that you want to connect with, folks that could support your work. You can also post the things that you're interested in, so you can meet people. It's just amazing. Like I could press something like media strategy, and I could find 15 or 20 other people on the network that are really interested in that. We could get together and we could talk. We also do networking sessions on Fridays. So the next one is coming up next week on Friday. So check it out. I'm going to put a link here in the chat, but I'll also send you an email with a replay of this video and other links related to networking with other folks in the network. So yeah, thanks everybody so much for joining us today.
And
Thanks
thank
for
you,
coming.
Ryan, for putting this together.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is great.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.